We're into the latter part of August, but for Middlesbrough, there's still a lot of business that could potentially be done before the transfer window closes. Middlesbrough have been busy already in terms of bringing players through the door at the Riverside Stadium. There's been a number of first-team players who've come in and really hit the ground running in the first couple of weeks of the season. You're looking at people like Luke Ayling, Delano Bergzorg, people like that who've come in and really made their mark straight away. Aidan Morris coming from Columbus Crew and looked like he's been playing in the Championship for years, just really taken to life in the second tier like a duck to water. But I think with so many players coming through the entrance door at the Riverside, it means that there's potential question marks over a couple of different players as we move into the final week or two of the transfer window. Middlesbrough squad is looking brilliant at the moment, but with those players coming in, it does mean that first team opportunities could be limited for some of the squad players already in place at the club. So who are the players that could be affected by such transfer dealings this summer? I've taken a little look at some of the other players who could be affected going into the last week and what the future might hold for them. If you are enjoying the content that I'm putting out at the moment, I do really appreciate your support. Please do hit like on this video and hit subscribe as well, because there's going to be plenty more Middlesbrough videos coming before the end of the transfer deadline, but also throughout the season as well. Really looking to step up the Middlesbrough coverage on the channel. So it'd be really great to get more of your support. But as far as plans for the rest of the transfer window go, let's dive right in. The first player who could be heading for the exit door before the end of the summer transfer window is Tom Glover. Now, Middlesbrough's goalkeeping situation is quite an interesting one. So, obviously, Seny Dieng, Middlesbrough signed 3 different goalkeepers last summer. Seny Dieng, Tom Glover, and Jamie Jones. They all came into the club. This summer, Jamie Jones has left. Seny Dieng is very much seen as the first choice at the Riverside Stadium, which means that Tom Glover's in a bit of a state of limbo. Now, the added complication in terms of the first team picture at the Riverside it's been made a little bit more complicated by the fact that Sol Brynn has returned from loan. Now, he's been really impressive over the last couple of seasons, spent a bit of time on loan in Scotland, was with Leyton Orient as well, and has come back with rave reviews. He came into pre-season, was given an opportunity by Michael Carrick to impress. Certainly has taken it, and now he's firmly in the mix of goalkeepers at the Riverside. Now, what that means for Middlesbrough, it's a really quite great problem to have, because what we've now got is 3 goalkeepers who are all challenging for that number 1 jersey. Now, that sounds like a really silly thing to say, and I've said this before on Twitter, and it's got some questions from people saying, "Oh, well, surely you want everyone to be challenging for a first team place." But the way that football sort of works at the moment is that goalkeepers do kind of have like their own sort of like, they call it like almost like a goalkeepers union sort of thing, where they're like their own little subsection of the team. Now, often there's a third choice goalkeeper who comes in. He's not really expecting to play in League or Cup, but his job is almost a bit of a joining figure between the coaching staff and the playing team. Now, that was the role that was filled by Jamie Jones last season. Now, Middlesbrough don't really have that at the moment. What they've got is Seny Dieng, Sol Brynn, and Tom Glover, all players who are seeing themselves as players who are capable of holding that number 1 jersey. That's great in practice, but what will happen is, as the season unfolds and Dieng is undoubtedly Middlesbrough's first choice goalkeeper, that is only likely to lead to frustration from Brynn and Tom Glover. Now, Brynn is in a position where, because he's on the younger side, he's a player who is really wanting to prove himself at Middlesbrough. It's going to be his first opportunity, so he'll be quite happy to get regular, get some, get some match action as the season unfolds. He already played against Leeds United. He'll get other games in the cup. He might also get a few opportunities in the league as well. But for someone like Tom Glover, he's at an age and a profile where he really needs to be playing regular first team football. Glover's 26 years of age. He was part of the Australia squad for the Asian Nations Cup earlier this year. So he's a player who has a real pedigree, someone who has ambitions of breaking into that Australia squad on a regular basis. He's never actually won a senior cap for Australia, but he's someone who's very much on the cusp of it. And for him, it's going to be really, really important that he's playing regular first-team football. I don't think he's in a position where he's going to want to be sitting around in second or even third place in the pecking order at the Riverside going into the new season. Now, I don't think Middlesbrough will be desperate to get rid of Glover by any means, because they clearly rate him. He's a goalkeeper who did well last season. He was given his opportunity, obviously, when Seny Dieng was injured, and he was off on international duty as well. And Tom Glover made 20 appearances for the club during that time. He made a couple of mistakes during that time. He was a little bit. In my opinion, he was caught out on a couple of easy-ish goals during his time in the team as well. He conceded 27 times in his 20 matches for the club. But he's someone who is trusted by the club, someone who could play in the first team should he be required to. But I think for someone like him, I think there's going to be a real opportunity and a real sort of need for him to be playing regular first team football this season. Now, for me, I think there will be interest there. I think there'll be interest from the EFL, possibly from Scotland, possibly from around Europe as well. And so for me, it would probably make sense that if someone did come in for Glover, they can offer him regular first team football. He'll be happy. He can go and do his thing and show exactly how capable he is in terms of breaking into the Australian national team. And for Middlesbrough, that would mean that there's almost a straight shootout between Seny Dieng and Sol Bryn, who's the challenger for the number one shirt. They can be vying for that jersey themselves, and then what Middlesbrough can then do is they may look to bring in a third option as that number 3 goalkeeper, as that more experienced player who's not really in contention for the shirt, but it's somewhat of a link between the coaching team and the players themselves. So it's going to be a really interesting one with regards to Glover. I do feel that if no one moves on this summer, if Tom Glover does stick around, this could be a situation that gets revisited in January because, as I said, if Seny Dieng is the first choice goalkeeper, you're probably going to be getting into January and you're going to have 2 quite frustrated goalkeepers in Bryn and Glover himself, just purely because, unlike other positions, there's not really the opportunity to rotate as much. Obviously, players aren't typically used coming off the bench in these matches as well. So it's not like Glover's going to be coming on after 60 minutes for a 30-minute outing to kind of like keep himself warm and keep himself sharp and that sort of thing. It's quite a lonely life being a goalkeeper if you're not in the first team. And that could lead to frustration, which is why I'm thinking that Tom Glover is a player who could potentially be heading for the exit door before the end of the summer transfer window. The next player who could potentially leave Middlesbrough before the end of the summer transfer window is Anthony Dijksteel. Now, if you'd asked me a week ago, I'd have said it was an absolute dead cert that Dijksteel would be leaving the club this summer. Now, he joined back in the summer of 2019, back when Jonathan Woodgate was in charge. It was a long, long time ago now, or it certainly seems it anyway. So he was brought in then, and since then he's been a fairly solid player for Middlesbrough. I think he's fallen out of favour a little bit under Michael Carrick in the last year or two, but he's made 132 appearances for the club. Been a fairly solid defender, really, at right back and at centre back as well. Nothing spectacular, but I think as Middlesbrough are now looking to sort of kick on, challenge for promotion and that sort of thing, I do think that Dijksteel's the sort of player who could be moved on. Now, Luke Ayling's come in at right back. He's looking head and shoulders above anyone in that position at the moment. So, as far as I'm concerned, the position, should he stay fit, is completely his. We've also got Tommy Smith, who is a very experienced, solid operator at right back. Obviously, he's injured. He's injured at the moment. It's likely that he's not going to be back until October, which obviously gives Michael Carrick a little bit of food for thought with regards to this situation. Because as far as Dijksteel is concerned, he's someone who I think, had Tommy Smith been fit now, he may have already moved on this summer. Dijksteel has just a year left on his contract, so that means, as far as the club are concerned, they would be keen to move him on and first of all get him off the wage bill, likely, but also to attract some kind of transfer fee for him, because obviously next summer he'd be available to leave for absolutely nothing to any club. In January, he'd be available to discuss pre-contract terms with clubs outside of England as well. So I think for Middlesbrough, they would ideally like to move him on this summer to attract some kind of transfer fee for him. But as I said, with Tommy Smith being injured, it does leave the club in a bit of a situation, because with Smith sidelined, if Dijksteel was to move on, it would mean that that for a little while, Luke Ayling would be the only natural option at right back. Now, I know that Rav van den Berg can play there. He can play there. He showed that he could do it last season. It's not his most natural position, and I think for someone like Rav, it's really important that he's playing in his best role, which is at centre back, which I think is what Michael Carrick would ideally like him to do as well. You've also got people like Izzy Jones, who, while you could question just how effective he is defensively, he has played in those sorts of positions before, primarily as a sort of right wing back. So he is someone who could fill in there should push come to shove. But I think as far as Dijksteel is concerned, it's a situation where I still feel like it's quite likely that he could move on before the end of August. I just can't really see there being that many opportunities for him. As I said at the start of this segment, I did think that the Steel was probably going to be done and dusted, but then he was handed a start against Leeds United, a decision which I thought was surprising given like how far down the pecking order he's sort of fallen. But then he came in, performed really, really well on the night, scored his first ever goal for Middlesbrough, and in my opinion, probably put in one of his best performances in a Middlesbrough shirt as well. So I think that possibly could have given Michael Carrick food for thought. It's it's a situation that will be interesting. I think like a lot of these scenarios, it's not really a case of if he doesn't leave by the end of August, that he's fully in Michael Carrick's plans, and it'll be with Middlesbrough for years to come, because I think a lot of these situations could be revisited in January. It may well be that the club decide to keep Dyke still around for the first half of the season, but then when obviously he's not getting that much game time, they might then decide to move him on when January does sort of roll around. So Dijksteel is going to be an interesting one to watch over the next week or so. My gut instinct is that he will probably still leave, possibly this summer. But it's going to be a very interesting one to watch, because ultimately, as I said, Michael Carrick needs to make sure that he's not short of options at right back, because the fixtures are going to come thick and fast through the autumn. And if Tommy Smith isn't fully up to speed, it's probably quite a big ask for Luke Ayling to to fill that role at right back week in, week out, 3 games a week in League and Cup. It's quite a big ask, and I think that cover of Dijksteel could be quite handy. So yeah, an interesting one to watch. And in summary, not quite sure what's going to happen with this one. Dan Barlassa's the next player on my list of players who could potentially be moving on from Middlesbrough before the end of the summer transfer window. Now, Barlassa's an interesting one. He's a player who played an awful lot of football last season. Hayden Hackney was injured. It was a really disrupted season for Hackney in a campaign which was widely expected to be his sort of coming of age season, the sort of season that would see him establish himself as a real top championship player, and probably one that would have earned him a move to the Premier League had he been able to stay fit. But that didn't happen for Hackney. He was out of the picture for a large section of the season, and that meant that for much of the campaign, it was Dan Barlassa and Johnny Howson who were playing in central midfield. Now, that central midfield pairing was largely effective. Let's be fair with it; it was largely effective. But what you did find that was with Dan Barlassa, he was someone who he gets caught in possession a little bit. I think he's an excellent ball playing midfielder. He's someone who can pick a pass probably better than most people in Middlesbrough's team. But what we found in the Championship last season was that he was maybe just a little bit slow on the ball sometimes. Maybe he just wanted a little bit too much time to pick out his pass and to execute it. And that led to a couple of hairy little moments where he was caught in possession in quite dodgy areas. Sometimes it led to goals, sometimes it led to near misses and that sort of thing. And that led to a few fans getting a bit frustrated with him in central midfield. If you look at the statistics, he's probably one of Middlesbrough's best performers and was last season. His passing stats are through the roof. Michael Carrick clearly really rates him. You can see why. Obviously, Michael Carrick was a very similar sort of player to Dan Barlassa. And that means that his stock is quite high at Middlesbrough at the moment. But what we're seeing coming into this season is, as mentioned before, Hackney is now back from injury. He's spending pre-season getting himself back up to speed. And so I think this season's going to be a big one for him. Aidan Morris has come in. He's looking like the real deal. And so it looks very much like Michael Carrick's trying to forge that partnership of Hayden Hackney and Aidan Morris as the primary duo in central midfield. Obviously, we've got Johnny Howson as well, the experienced option. He's on another 1-year rolling contract. He's picked up I think it's a hamstring injury in the early part of this season. So that's going to keep him out for a little while. And I think it really just kind of leads to a bit of a situation with Dan Barlassa where you kind of don't really know what the future is going to hold for him. He's a player who I think is highly rated by the club, highly rated by Michael Carrick, but you'd like to think that when everyone is fully fit, it's going to be Hayden Hackney and Aidan Morris, who are going to be the first choice options in central midfield. I personally would pick Johnny Howson over Dan Barlaser in central midfield as well, should he be fit. If anyone's going to get rotated in, I'd be picking Howson to come in for one of those two. And to me, that means that Dan Barlaser is probably fourth choice central midfielder. And that means that I think while it's a long season and there's plenty of football that you probably will get over the course of the campaign, you've got to wonder whether he is a player who would maybe be available should the right offer come in. He doesn't strike me as the sort of player that Middlesbrough are going to forcefully be trying to sell. They're not going to be proactive in trying to get him out the door or anything like that, because as I mentioned, he's a trusted player, he's reliable, someone who is did play a big part for Middlesbrough last season and has already featured heavily in the early part of this season as well. But you just sort of think that if someone was to come in for him, offer Middlesbrough a little bit of money and offer him the opportunity to be a regular first-team player, it could be a deal that might get done. Obviously, he was at Rotherham United before he came to Middlesbrough, did really, really well there. It might be that another club in the Championship comes in for him and offers him the opportunity to become that star central midfield player. I think he's probably better suited to playing in a midfield three, if I'm honest. I think he's a sort of ball-playing player who you maybe need two slightly more defensive-minded players to play behind him, to cover him, to allow him to play his natural game a little bit. And obviously, earlier in the summer, there was interest from Turkey in Dan Barlaser. That seems to have gone quiet a little bit now. But there's potential that could come back to life. And I think for Dan Barlaser, it is one that's going to be an interesting one, because it's going to be up to him to decide whether he backs himself to force his way into the Middlesbrough team and to play a good number of games this season, or whether he does, as I say, kind of fall down the pecking order and become that sort of fourth choice player who struggles to get game time. And obviously you've got to think as well that you've got players like Lowell McCabe, talented young midfielder, who will be wanting to push himself into those plans as well. So could that fourth choice central midfield role go to a younger player, and could give Middlesbrough the opportunity to cash in and make a little bit of money? It's going to be an interesting one to watch. I personally don't. I think ideally you'd want to keep him around as a really good, solid squad player. But given that he has fallen down the pecking order, it will be interesting to see whether he does decide to push for a move, because careers are short. He is in his prime years as well. He doesn't really want to be sitting on the bench. So it's going to be an interesting one with Dan Barlaser, and very keen to see what Middlesbrough plan to do with him over the next week or so. The next player who I'm going to discuss is Alex Gilbert. Now, Gilbert arrived at Middlesbrough a year ago. He joined from Brentford, or from Brentford's B team. And came to Middlesbrough as one of the sort of like development signings, I guess, of the season. He played a lot of under-23 football for the club over the course of the campaign. Never really got into the first team picture, at least until the last month or so of the season. It seemed to me like it was maybe a situation where he just maybe wasn't kind of cutting the mustard, wasn't quite ready for the first team. But then when he did get his opportunity at the back end of last term, he was really, really impressive. He made 12 appearances in the Championship and all over the course of last term. Scored 1 goal, got 3 assists, which was a decent tally considering those last few games of the campaign. Really kind of made his mark on them, and a player who's very comfortable on the ball, really likes to get on it and dictate play. He can play on the wing. He was playing centrally as well. More recently, going into the season, he's been playing more as a sort of number 10, a kind of understudy to Finn Azaz in that role. But I think for me, the main difference is that as opposed to Finn Azaz, Alex Gilbert likes to get on the ball possibly a little bit deeper, likes to get on the ball and kind of dictate play with intricate passing and that sort of thing. Someone who's a really kind of like technical player, someone who's got really good vision, and someone who I think has got a really bright future at Middlesbrough. Now, the problem is that the attacking area of the pitch for Middlesbrough is really, really competitive this season. I've mentioned Finn Azaz there. You've also got people like Riley McGree and Delano Bergzorg on the left. You've got Mika Hamilton, who's come in from Man City. You've got Izzy Jones. You've got Marcus Forss. Remember him? He's injured, but he'll be coming back at some point. You've then got Emmanuel Letilath and Tommy Conway and Josh Coburn. Lots of attacking players who are all going to be vying for minutes this season. Now, the question with regards to Alex Gilbert is he going to be playing enough to justify keeping him around the first team? He's not a player who I could see being sold this summer. I personally really rate him. I think Michael Carrick really rates him from what we've seen over the last 3-4 months, I guess, during the back end of last season, pre-season, and then the start of of this term. I think the question is whether he'll play enough to be justify sticking around at the club. I think in an ideal world he would. I think he's a really good option to have off the bench. I also wouldn't bat an eyelid if he was named in the starting 11 at number 10. I think a few people have been, probably a bit unjustified, but a few people have been a bit critical of Finn Azaz in the first couple of weeks of the season. I think it's far too early for all of that. But if Alex Gilbert was given an opportunity in that number 10 role, I'd be really quite excited to see how he got on, because he's been doing really well. He played against Leeds United, and I thought he was absolutely excellent against Leeds. Granted, it was like the parting of the seas when he was trying to play balls through that Leeds defence. It was just so open, made it so easy for us. But hey, it was a brilliant night. But it was a really great one for Alex Gilbert, who really got to enjoy dictating play from deep positions and playing these intricate passes through. And it just showed exactly what he's capable of. I'd love him to stick around at Middlesbrough for the duration of this term. I think he's got a lot to offer. I think he'd be a brilliant squad player and a great option to have off the bench for those sorts of games where we are looking for a little bit of cutting edge, a little bit of quality to try and win the game. But if he's not going to be playing regularly, there's every opportunity that he could also head out on loan. There is an argument to say that would be a better option for him. He could go to a club in the Championship, probably like lower end of the Championship, where he could go out and play regular first team football, play 40, 45, 50 games in all competitions over the course of the season, which would be really beneficial for him. But for me, like I said, I would really like to see him stick around at Middlesbrough, but there are a lot of rumours flying around, as there always are at this point in the season, and loan interest does seem to be sort of building. There's a lot of murmurs around his situation, and so there is a sort of feeling that a loan move could happen before the end of August, and that'll be a really interesting one to keep an eye on. I think either way, as far as I'm concerned, I would put my full faith in the club for what they decide is best for him. Like a lot of these situations, it could be something that's revisited in January. It might be that he sticks around at the club for the next few months, but by the time it gets to December, January, they realise that he's only played 5, 6, 7 games, a lot of them off the bench, and a lot of them only 5-10 minute cameos and that sort of thing. And they may then decide to send him out on loan for the second half of the season. But it's going to be a really interesting one to watch. He's a really talented player and someone who I think has got a really bright future at Middlesbrough. But now that he's 22 years of age, I do think he's someone who needs to be playing regularly. And the question mark for Middlesbrough and for him will be whether that will happen at the Riverside under Michael Carrick this season, given the wealth of competition. The next player who I'm going to discuss is probably the person who's been attracting the most newspaper column inches over the last couple of weeks, and that's Josh Coburn. Now, Coburn's situation, for anyone who has missed any of the speculation over the last couple of weeks, is that he's a player who could potentially be leaving the club before the end of the summer transfer window, potentially on a loan deal, potentially on a permanent deal. Now, this situation's come about because Emmanuel Latilath is Middlesbrough's first choice striker. And hopefully nothing will happen with regards to this, but should he be sticking around this season, he will be the first choice striker for the duration of the campaign. He showed at the back end of last season just how good he is. He's exciting, he's dynamic, he's shown that he clearly knows where the goal is in the Championship, and so he's going to be the first choice striker. Right, that's settled. Tommy Conway has come in from Bristol City. He's a young player who knows where the goal is in the Championship as well. He's got a double-digit haul in each of the last 2 seasons for Bristol City, but he is still young and inexperienced, someone who has a lot of improving to do, someone who will need to adapt to life under Michael Carrick, and someone who is also one for the future while still being a player for now, if that kind of makes sense. He's a player who'll get a good amount of game time, but he won't be coming in and expecting to start, in my opinion, because he'll know that Emmanuel Latilath is the main man in attack. So there's 2 players already fighting for that number 1 striking spot in Michael Carrick's team. Obviously, Michael Carrick's team only play with one out-and-out striker with a supporting cast sort of behind them. There's 2 strikers already. Josh Coburn, for me, as a result of Conway coming in, then drops to 3rd in that pecking order. Now, I really like Josh Coburn. He seems like a really good lad, which isn't the only... It can't just be based on that for him sticking around at the club. But he seems like a really good lad, a really honest lad who works hard. He's strong. He's powerful in attack. He's got a good eye for goal. The problem for me with him and Michael Carrick's team is that sometimes the game seems to pass him by a little bit. Michael Carrick likes his strikers to play on the shoulder of defenders, something that Emmanuel Letiolaf does very, very well. Cameron Archer did it when he was at the club as well. He would play off the shoulder of defenders, run into those kind of channels or run into the penalty area that way, and free up space basically for the players behind to do the intricate work and to pick them out basically. Josh Coburn doesn't really play like that. He's not someone who is sort of blessed with the kind of pace that Latiolaf has. He's an out-and-out kind of old-school number 9. He's not a target man. I think that's a bit disrespectful because I think he's got a lot more to his game than that, but he is a sort of old-fashioned number 9, someone who get in the box, get the ball out wide, get the crosses in, they'll find him in the box and he'll put them away because he is a natural goal scorer. I think that isn't really how Michael Carrick's teams like to play. They don't really like to get the ball wide and get the ball crossed in. It's not the sort of way that a lot of Middlesbrough's build-up play comes. They do get crosses into the box, but it's often kind of like cut-back crosses and that sort of thing. And I think for me, it doesn't quite fit with Josh Coburn, and that to me is a little bit frustrating because it does mean that the game kind of, through no fault of his own, I'll add, does seem to pass him by at times, which means that Middlesbrough fans don't really get to see the best of him. Now, he spent a little bit of time out on loan with Bristol Rovers, which was successful. Last summer, it looked like he was going to be joining Plymouth on a loan deal, but because of Middlesbrough's lack of striking options at the time, he ended up sticking around. Did fairly well during the autumn, got a few goals and that. Suffered a bit of an injury. He was struggling with a hernia for quite a lot of last season, which meant that it wasn't the best all-round season for him. But yeah, coming into this season, it's really, really important for Josh Coburn that he's playing regular first-team football. And as I've mentioned, I can't really see that happening. There's been a fair amount of interest in Josh Coburn already. The main team who seem to be leading the way, according to reports, is Millwall. They're very keen to bring in a new striker this summer. And I think, obviously, I'm not an expert on Millwall or on football tactics, but he does seem to be an ideal fit for them. Millwall do like to play a fairly direct style of play, particularly under Neil Harris, and I think Josh Coburn would just be a brilliant player for them. I could just see him fitting in so seamlessly, someone who would be a really good, solid, no-nonsense striker who will get 10 to 12 goals in the Championship in the right team, in my opinion. I can't see that happening with Middlesbrough, both because of the style of play, but also because of the lack of opportunities that are going to be available to him. So it's going to be an interesting one for him because, similar to what I've said in other segments, it's going to be potentially up to him to decide whether he wants to stay and fight for his place in the team. But as I said, I do think he's probably third in the pecking order. When Marcus Forss comes back, he's going to be another player who might be vying for that centre-forward position as well. So it does leave Coburn in a tricky position. Heading out on loan for the season could be one way around it. He could go out and do really well. It could be a chance to play some regular first team football, and then everyone can just sort of reassess where we're at next summer. But I do also think that he's the kind of player who maybe needs to go and find somewhere to sort of like make a home, make a name for himself in his own right, become the main man. And I think somewhere like Millwall could be a really good place for him to do that. As I said, I think he's a player who's got the potential to be a really good Championship player. I'm not sure personally whether I could see him going on to be a Premier League player. I don't think he's the sort of high potential talent that Middlesbrough must keep at all costs from that point of view. I think obviously Middlesbrough are going to be trying to get into the Premier League, and I don't think Josh Coburn's the sort of player that we would need from that point of view, but he is someone who could be really solid at a Championship level, but potentially not in this Middlesbrough team and not under Michael Carrick, and he might need to be in a different environment to get the best from him. So it's going to be an interesting one with Josh Coburn. My gut instinct is that he probably will move on before the end of the summer transfer window. It'll be a real shame. I think also, similar to other players, he played really, really well against Leeds United. If that was his last kind of attempt to try and convince Michael Carrick that he has a future at the club, he couldn't have done any more because he was just absolutely unplayable against Leeds United. Playing in behind the defence, his finishing was on point. He just caused problems all night for them. And so potentially that was his what could be his final appearance for Middlesbrough. It could be that it was the sort of performance he was putting in to try and earn a move away. It's just going to be a really interesting one to keep an eye on over the next week. I think Josh Coburn's a brilliant player. He seems like a great young man, and I think it'll just be really important for him to play regular first team football this season. And whether that comes away from the Riverside or at Middlesbrough, you just kind of hope that he can kick on and show what he's all about, because he's a quality young player and someone who we could see causing real problems at this level. So yeah, one to keep an eye on. My first suggestion is that probably he will move on before the end of the summer transfer window. But yeah, everyone's got a sort of different view. Let me know what you think Middlesbrough should do with Josh Coburn as well. Drop into the comments below. Let me know whether you'd like him to stay, because this is another subject that does get sort of divisive views on social media. Some people think that he's overrated. I would like to see him move on. Other players think that we shouldn't be letting him go because he's someone who clearly is a talented player and someone who can supplement Michael Carrick's squad quite nicely. So let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you think of Josh Coburn here. So as you've heard, while Middlesbrough brought in plenty of new names this summer, there's still a lot of business that could potentially be done between now and the end of the summer transfer window. If you are enjoying these videos, please do hit like and hit subscribe as well. There's going to be a lot more Middlesbrough content coming over the coming days and weeks. Really excited to get stuck into that, and also drop into the comments below and let me know what business you'd like Middlesbrough to do before the end of the summer transfer window. Are there more deals that you'd like to do in terms of incoming signings? Are there any players in particular that you'd like the club to sign? Or are there any players that you feel like Middlesbrough should be trying to push out the exit door before the end of the summer window? Let me know in the comments below. As I said, hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll catch up with you next time.